The alliance continued on. There were some tensions in the 60s, especially in 62 when the leader of France, General de Gaulle, decided that French membership in NATO was a risk to its own independence. He didn't agree to the path that NATO was taking. He decided to pull France out of the unified command structure, making France still a member, but on a much lower level. And this is something that continued up until 2009, when President Sarkozy brought France back. Nevertheless, throughout the 70s and 80s, NATO was in quite good shape. Naturally, during the 80s, President Reagan in the US and Prime Minister Thatcher in the UK were both pushing for NATO member states to really pay attention to their military expenditure, to their military production. And with the Soviet Union not being able to keep up, they were spending more and more percent of their GDP on the military, but this also meant that they were neglecting other important parts of their state economy, leading in the end to an economic collapse, creating a societal collapse in which simply the morale of people disappeared, and nobody really wanted to hear anything more about the Soviet Union, leading to its breakup in 1991, with the Soviet satellite states being able to pull away 2 years earlier in '89. This is when a debate really started on what NATO should be in the future. It was decided to maintain the alliance in the event that there could be a resurgence of a Russian threat. Now, in hindsight,
it was a good decision.
We see that it was certainly very much needed. There was also the discussion, as very quickly these Soviet satellite states that had been able to leave the Soviet orbit, they clearly signaled that they were very interested in becoming NATO member states. And this decision was quickly taken that this was absolutely possible. Nevertheless, there were some worries, as naturally the military commanders in these states had just a couple of years earlier had been in a military alliance with the Soviet Union. Many of their generals had been trained in Moscow, and these states were still deeply penetrated by the Soviet intelligence services. But they managed to weed out these most dangerous components that had been in their militaries. And by 1999, you had the first former Soviet satellite states becoming NATO members. Poland, Hungary, Czechia, and Slovakia all joined the alliance. This was truly a watershed moment, and since then we had additional waves of new members. The alliance has grown, and right now NATO has approved, so to say, that there is a membership aspiration in Bosnia and Herzegovina as well as in Georgia and in Ukraine. So it is possible that the alliance will continue to grow in the coming years. We have other states that have become members recently, such as Albania, North Macedonia, Montenegro. So the last couple of years have really seen NATO growing.
And most notably, most recently, Finland.
Oh yes, of course.
And with the possibility, fingers crossed, of Sweden as well, which of course marks a tremendous change in Swedish policy.
Absolutely. More than 200 years of peace and non-alignment, ever since losing Finland in the War of 1812. Sweden has, probably together with Switzerland, being the most famous example of a state that is military non-aligned or neutral. However, after the full-scale Russian invasion in 2022, they realized that this was an untenable position and that the collective security offered by NATO was the only path forward. It certainly looks, at least after the Turkish elections now in May, that Erdogan is softening up to the prospect of Sweden joining. So I do believe that this is a question of a couple of months, and later this year, at some point, Sweden should become the 32nd member state of NATO.
Adam, I'm going to have to ask you to pause there. As usual, we've run out of time, but we'll pick it up next time. There we are. I've interrupted Adam almost in mid-sentence, but fear not, if you join us next time, as we hope you will, we'll pick up the story. In the meantime, thank you very much and look forward to seeing you next time on Poland Daily History.